metal band, Centurion. This was before single parenthood, love for his daughter, and forgiveness shown by people he once hated helped to change his world, bringing him love for diversity and gratitude for all life. After spending over a decade as a successful information technology consultant and entrepreneur, Arno is now a speaker, author of My Life After Hate, co-author with Pardeep of The Gift of Our Wounds, filmmaker, and peace-building consultant. Let's welcome Pardeep and Arno.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burke. Thank you so much, Dr. Billups, Dr. Livingston, Kuldeep, for that wonderful prayer. I want to preemptively thank all of the facilitators that are going to be leading the discussions. And thank you for everyone that's attending. I want to extend a deep appreciation to Louis and all of the work that you do. As we kind of thought about tonight, Arno and I, and as Dr. Burke kind of read off our bios, I thought a lot about the way that our lives kind of change and weave. And, I think a little bit about discernment and where everyone is, especially a year and a half into COVID, and where you all might be in your educational careers and what you want to do as you leave the walls of Lewis University. And when I think about discernment, I think a lot about just my life and Arno's life and how we came together. And as this book kind of, was just a something that we were spiritually guided to do. And neither one of us was in a place where we said, okay, we're going to write a book, but just the clues of life, the things that happen in the quiet. Lots of times I get the discussion of, do you see God? Do you hear God? Do you sense God? And in a way, once you kind of are open to it, it's almost overwhelming how much you do see and hear and sense. And it's in people, it's in everything. It's in everything that we do. So I hope that your life and the way that it goes, that you will understand that it's everywhere. And when you're having a difficult time, when you're struggling, and many of you may be struggling because these are difficult times, these are challenging times, you will search and you will listen and you will quiet yourselves. And when we talk about being mindful, it's not just being mindful for just mindfulness sake. It is being mindful for discernment's sake. It is when you have a tough decision to make, you be able to make that with extreme spiritual guidance. My journey in this country began when I was 6 years old. I immigrated from a small farming village in India. And when we came here, we had the typical sort of immigrant journey and dream. And that dream and journey really was about, we wanted to create a better life for my parents wanted to create a better life for their children than the life that they would have led if they had stayed in India. And I think that we share that with many immigrants, many asylum seekers. And as you're seeing the Afghanistan, and then you're seeing other sort of refugee resettlement crises happening around the world, please look inside our hearts and know that we have responsibility in this world to make sure that that's open to people after us. And when I came here, I moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. For those that aren't familiar with Milwaukee, Wisconsin, we have extreme fluctuation of weather. And oftentimes I ask my mother, I'm like, why, out of all the places that we could have moved to, why Milwaukee, Wisconsin? It can get upwards of 100 degrees to below 20 or below 30, or the wind chill below 50. And so, but growing up, I love Milwaukee. I've lived in nearly every part of the city. And that was kind of our journey of like moving from place to place to location. And I think a lot of what the inspiration for that moving was, as immigrants come to this new country, they look for a safe place to live. And I would find out later that if we don't start investing in all neighborhoods, there is no safe place to live. You can't sort of, compartmentalize violence and justify it and say we can segregate it into certain areas, because that gets away from our spiritual duty as well. And so over time, that was what my parents were trying to do. And, I think that, again, coming back to, I watched them struggle from a job that they made $1.50 an hour to owning their own business and becoming financially successful in the eyes of what they deemed as successful. And by the time that August 5th really happened, and on August 5th, for those that don't know, August 5th, a white supremacist named Wade Michael Page murdered and killed 7 people at the Sikh temple of Wisconsin in Oak Creek. It would go down, and as far as history, to be one of the deadliest hate crimes committed in a place of worship in nearly 50 years, since the time the 4 little girls lost their lives during the civil rights movement. And just as that sacrifice meant so much to the civil rights movement in the 60s and would inspire the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act and everything that would come out of legislation, we wanted our sacrifice to also mean something to this country. And so when that happened, Arno and I, not that we did it at that time, we didn't know each other at that time. Arno, he'll talk about his journey in this country in just a little bit, but we both had a spiritual responsibility. And this is what I mean by discernment, is that there are always going to be choices in your life, and they are choices. And sometimes those choices will not be easy. But I encourage you to dig deep and try to make sure that you are fulfilling what it is you're destined to fulfill in this lifetime. When we think about happiness and sadness to me doesn't mean something tragic that happens to you or bad thing that happens to you. Happiness doesn't mean, you won the lottery or something good happened. I mean, yeah, definitely. You can be happy because that's a great thing to do. And that's a bad thing to, sure. But it's a state of place. It's a state of being. And oftentimes when we talk about sadness, we think about it in the sense of, are you fulfilling what you're supposed to fulfill in this lifetime? Therefore, you will see many people who are very rich, very sad. You will see many people who may not have a lot, but very happy because they know. Because you only know. And at that time, when we made that choice was really saying, what does forgiveness look like, as was pointed out, and what does it mean to a community? What does it mean to me individually? And for me, when that happened, my father was the temple president. He was a leader of the temple. And Kuldeep will tell you, in Sikh politics, a president of a Gurdwara can barely last 2 years. My father was such a great leader, and he led by example, that he lasted 15 years as the temple president. And that's unbelievable. That's like a US president running for 40 years, because our politics is so sometimes cannibalistic. But he was no more. He was gone. And I had to kind of pick up the mantle and say, how do I lead by example? And part of that was, I have to lead by example, not just inside of our sanctuary walls, but I have to lead outside our sanctuary walls, because there's a battle that's happening. There's a battle that happens in us internally, and then there's a battle that happens outside of ourselves. And there's a battle happening in our neighborhoods, and there's a battle that's happening in all of America. And know that both of those battles can happen simultaneously. And so when I kind of embarked on that, a lot of the work that I wanted to do was really around how do we help our internal community heal, and how do we help our external community understand who we are. And so we formed an organization, the organization what was called Serve to Unite. And within Sikhi and within lots of our faiths, service is the biggest component to it. Service being the universal language that people can understand, because sometimes we may not speak the same faith language or even just linguistically, but we all know what service looks like. And so we decided, let's get out there and let's serve, and let's show people who we are as Sikhs, and let's invite people into our sanctuary walls and get to know, and they can get to know who we are. Well, when I started to invite people inside our sanctuary walls, trauma will do sometimes is it will keep you insulated. It will not want people to come inside. And so when I saw people coming inside that were not of the same complexion, I would get the challenges by many in our community to say, Pardeep, we don't feel good with many of the people that are coming inside, and we just want to be left alone. And now we think about how we get past trauma. We get past trauma by lovingly challenging ourselves out of it. And so that was both an internal battle and external battle. And really, once Arno and I met, and Arno can tell you a little bit about, the time that we met, that was a battle for me to say, would I actually forgive a person like this? Or am I preaching something that I'm maybe hypocritical in? And how much can I mean it? And I would love to say to you, the last 10 years have been easy on both of our lives. Today, the work that we do is definitely, we work with communities. We have worked with communities. We work with schools, universities, mental health. Today, a lot of the work that we do is trying to make sure that people that have been in Arnold's shoes and have gone down the extremism path can heal, can become productive members of society, that we can keep a society safe, that we can develop sort of a prevention approach to extremism. And I am very, very proud that I can do that work with Arno. I thank you all for listening and us being here, and I'll let Arno talk about his journey. Go ahead, brother.
Thanks, Pardeep. Thanks to Dr. Billups and Dr. Burke and everyone involved in making this evening happen. Very grateful to all the facilitators, especially. Pardeep and I, of all the talks we've done, of which it's got to be hundreds at this point, we're always mindful that every experience is a unique one that wouldn't be that same experience if one person were missing. So everyone participating this evening is contributing to make it the event and the experience that it is. I'm going to frame my thoughts around the questions that will be posed to everyone in the breakout rooms. Those questions being, talk about a time when you hurt someone or when someone hurt you, and then think about what might be holding you back from a full journey into healing, and maybe some ideas of where you could go from there. And I'm always so grateful to Pardeep Singh Kaleka, my brother and my friend, and for all the things that he's taught me over the years that we've known each other. It'll be this October of next year will be our 10th anniversary party. I hope you get me something nice. We'll definitely have to go out to dinner again on that day. But when I think about a time when I hurt someone or someone hurt me, because of my past, because of who I was, because of all the harm that I did to the world, to innocent people, to my family, I very easily lose sight of the harm that I've done to myself, first and foremost. It's a very challenging idea to think about how violence harms the perpetrator. A lot of people get angry upon hearing that, and I can't blame them, especially someone who's been a target of hate or a victim of violence. So I would never say that violence harms the perpetrator the same way or as much. And I always want to be wary of putting things on a scale and saying, oh, well, you suffered so much more than this person, or my suffering is worse than your suffering, because it's all suffering. And it's all trauma, and it all kind of can have the same effects on ourselves and our relationship with others. So when I think about a time of hurt in my life, tonight I'm going back to some of my earliest memories of hurt. And that was hearing my mother screaming in tears at my father to leave her alone at 2 a.m. on a weeknight. Now in Wisconsin, bar time is 2 a.m. And that was more often than not when my father came home. I grew up in a nice house in a nice neighborhood in a very well-to-do suburb of Milwaukee. By the standards of this suburb, I was the poor kid. By world standards, I was ridiculously wealthy. But of course, when you're growing up, you're not aware of that. You're not aware of how other people in the world struggle and what they have to go through. And as Pardeep pointed out also, that our material trappings of wealth really don't have a lot of bearing on sadness or happiness. And quite often, people who seem to have a lot are actually really sad because they're not genuinely happy. Hearing my mother cry and growing up and literally seeing her at the end of her rope throughout my childhood, because her relationship with my father was horrible. My father's drinking put a ton of pressure on my mother to support this family that was living beyond its means. And so as I grew up and I saw my mother suffer, it made me suffer. And rather than be a good kid and again, I kind of like have a spiritual memory to where, okay, this is my fault. This is what I did wrong, is the first thought I have. And what I did wrong at that point as a little kid was, instead of saying, hey, Mom, I love you, how can I help? I just started to distance myself from her and from my father, both of whom love me very, very much. My father has a disease of alcoholism that he still struggles with, and he struggled back then, and he was doing the best he could despite all the dysfunction in our house. And of course, as I distanced myself from my parents, my suffering got worse, and I started lashing out at other kids. This exercise we're all about to embark on is something Pardeep and I just call hurt people. And we didn't pioneer that. I first heard it at a play in Chicago from a great theater group called Collaboration. I'm sure they heard it from somewhere else. This is really a theme of human spirituality, is that violence comes from suffering. If you're happy and you're healthy and you're well adjusted and you're spiritually grounded and you have a sense of inner peace, you're simply not going to intentionally hurt people, because that's not our natural state. We hurt people when we go through trauma and we're not able to process it in a healthy way. So I started lashing out at other kids. I was a bully on the school bus in kindergarten. I got a habit of causing trouble, and it was very much like an addiction. I got a rush from scaring children, from scaring parents, from traumatizing teachers. I got a high from causing trouble. And so my antisocial behavior escalated from bullying on the school bus to fights in the schoolyard to breaking and entering to vandalism. I started drinking when I was 14. Alcoholism is very much a genetic disease as well as an environmental disease. So the first beer I had, I was, boom, an alcoholic. By the time I'm 16, I'm a full-blown alcoholic. I've been violent since I was a little kid, and hate was just another part of the rush that I was constantly chasing, the same way a heroin junkie chases a fix. And that's when I was exposed to white nationalist ideology via white power music. And you got to remember, this is like in the late 1980s, pre-internet. This is someone actually handing me, for all the kids in the audience, we used to have these things called Walkmans. They were about this big. They had this thing called a cassette tape in there and headphones. And that was how you heard music. And someone played this white power skinhead music for me. And that's when I'm just like, oh, this really pisses people off. This really repulses people. Now I got like mainlined into this way to lash out at society and to make my inner suffering, that's of course only getting worse as I hurt other people, manifest itself in the outside world. I was involved in white nationalism for 7 years. I've done horrible things that will haunt me to my grave, and they should. I never in my life, and am I ever going to say, well, that's okay. It's okay that I did that, because I was suffering. I'll say that about someone else's behavior, but I'm very reluctant to say it about my own behavior. So if I think about something that's holding me back from reaching my potential healing, it's self-forgiveness. Now, I've been working on self-forgiveness for over a decade now. I went public with my story in 2010, and I met Pardeep in late 2012. And all along this journey, it's been a constant struggle for me to say what I did wasn't okay, but I have to forgive myself for what I've done. And the reason why I have to is because I can't help other people if I'm beating myself up, if I'm hating myself. When I quit drinking in 2004, I left hate groups in 1994. Being a man of extremes, I went from being a skinhead to being a raver. I spent another 7 years in that counterculture. I quit drinking in 2004, which was like another birth for me. But at the same time, without the alcohol to numb the harm that I had done to everyone and to myself, I fell into the suicidal depression in 2007, where the only reason I'm here to talk to you now is, again, because of my daughter. I couldn't kill myself because I'm a single parent. So I've spent a lot of time hating myself, more than I've ever hated anyone else. And today I know that I can't help other people ideally avoid the mistakes I've made, which has been a big part of my personal mission and Pardeep and I's mission. And if they do happen to make those mistakes, I can't intervene and help guide them to a healthier path if I'm hating myself and if I'm beating myself up. So finally today, after working on this for over a decade, I can say I'm a good person. I mess up still, but I'm doing the best that I can, and I deserve to be successful. I deserve to be happy, and I deserve to be loved. 10 years ago, it would have been very, very difficult for me to even choke those words out for you tonight. Now I can say those words with authenticity, and I can mean it. And I'm feeling great right now, but something might happen tomorrow where that old part of me comes back and says, hey, you suck. You've done horrible things. You deserve to suffer. And now, rather than letting that voice take over and kind of run away, I just see it as what it is. It's that little child who was terrified hearing his mother cry in the middle of the night. And I say, all right, dude, I get it. I hear you. And it's noted, but like, I got work to do. There's a lot of suffering in this world, and I can't help other people through their suffering if I'm beating myself up for my past. So those are my thoughts regarding this theme of suffering and the two questions that you guys are going to explore in the breakouts. And I think now we're going to begin that process of, this is way more fun in person, but today we're going to do it in Zoom. So cue the breakouts and our great facilitators.
Thanks so much, Pardeep and Arno, for setting the tone and getting us in a position to have meaningful conversations in our breakout rooms. I just want to offer a few just simple guidelines for respectful dialogue that we would invite all participants to adhere to while in breakout rooms. An invitation to be open to and respectful of the ideas and feelings of others. Please use I language rather than you or we, and just speak for yourself. Recognize the difference between intent and impact, that even when we don't mean to say something, hurtful. Sometimes it lands the wrong way. Practice using both and instead of but in order to acknowledge and honor multiple realities. Avoid judging yourself or others. We hope that you will participate and maybe push yourself, even if it's uncomfortable. Say just enough so that there's time for as many people as possible to share. Engage in deep listening to one another. And remember that confidentiality, in other words, the stories shared in small group should stay in the small group. And it is not our role to share anyone else's story with others. And so for this first small group, we're going to ask you to consider this question, and Arno sort of alluded to it. Share a time when you may have intentionally or unintentionally hurt someone. Facilitators will be able to remind you of the theme for the first breakout once you're in the breakout room. And we're going to take approximately 10 minutes in this breakout session. Again, the theme is share a time when you may have intentionally or unintentionally hurt someone. And we will send you off into the rooms. For those watching this on live stream, we will be taking this pause. It's 7:38, so at 7:48 we will rejoin. There's still a handful of people that have not joined a room, so hopefully that will happen shortly.
Carolina, Devin, Bob, Mallory, Rich, Tom. They heard their name.
I know.
So they did great work with great job with prayer.
Cameron's our IT guy. Mallory's putting her 3-year-old to bed. So, and Tom may be in the same room with Sarah. So anyway, it is what it is. So Rich, if you're still in the room.
Yeah,
Rich,
I'm here.
is there any way to pause the live streaming? I see a way to stop it, but I don't see a way to pause it.
No, so it looks like the live stream has to stay live,
Okay.
but it will only focus on this main room.
I know, that's what I'm afraid of. Cameron, why don't you unpin me? I guess I could have unpinned myself.
You know what we could do for the live stream?
Yeah.
We could share the video, right, of the Nation Swell video.
How long is it?
Like 7 minutes, 8 minutes.
Oh. Okay, so if I make you co-host, you have it up and ready?
I think I can do it right now.
Oh, did I? Okay, I hope I did give you the capacity.
So for those that are out there, we're going to share a video. Just take me a little bit to set up.
That morning was just a beautiful.
can you pin me? And that should take us into 48. Dr. Billups.
Yep, sounds good.
So this is a video from a little bit ago. So they say 6 victims, but we had a 7th person pass. But it summarizes a lot of the work that Arno and I have done over the years, with, I guess, exception to our work as of like the last 3 years. Let me know if you could just put a thumbs up if you guys can hear it.
Serene morning, had the windows down, thinking to myself, like literally thinking to myself, this is a beautiful morning. Life seemed, it was just great. I start to see squad cars flying by us. The squad car pulls up in front, like tapes it off real quick. Ask the police officer, like, sir, what's going on? He's like, son, there's a shooting that happened at the temple.
Police say the shooting began around 10:30 Sunday morning as many inside the Sikh temple were gathering for worship. Witnesses said the first shots came outside, inside mayhem.
I felt anger, but then I felt this sense of relief that like I wasn't involved in that. I also felt this incredible sense of guilt. For the past 5.5 years, I've continued to wrestle with those two feelings, survivor's guilt and survivor's relief. I am just appreciative to live this life, but I also have this guilt of I'm not doing enough.
You guys all hear that? When we breathe in suffering and we breathe out healing.
Serve to Unite was founded in response to the August 5th, 2012 Sikh temple shooting. It was a means for the Sikh community to transform this atrocity into something inspirational that would bring people together from that day forward.
It was initially formed to bring about an awareness of the Sikh community, but then we knew that it was going to morph into something much bigger than that to really address communal healing for all communities.
Today, Serve to Unite works with young people from 2nd grade through college. We do arts-driven service learning and global engagement. We also organize a 6K run every year to raise money for scholarships for 6 young people in honor of the 6 victims of the Sikh temple shooting. And recently, Pardeep and I have started working with small towns and municipalities, trying to help them become comfortable with demographic change as populations are changing.
We're weaving in our parts of ourselves into a map of Milwaukee to end the segregation, to bring everybody together.
There's places where people are just not as unified, and if we have a chance to change that, we should definitely do it. Especially with Milwaukee being like that, we should do as much as we can.
So this is the bullet hole that was left by the shooter as he was trying to shoot into the women that were here. He was just shooting from back here. And then Dad's final resting place was in this room, as was the other priest who was working. And he gets out here, and as these responding officers are coming to the scene, they engage in a firefight with Wade Page. And Wade Page takes his own life. The shooter killed himself. There was not much explanation from law enforcement, so I said, let me reach out to Arno and really find out why white supremacists do these things. In a selfish kind of way, I also wanted someone to raise their hand and say, you know what, I'm responsible for this.
In 1987, me and a few friends of mine started a white power skinhead gang in Milwaukee. We started our own white power skinhead band also. And our band was very much a rallying point for like every pissed off white kid in Wisconsin.
We must secure the existence of our race and the future of white children.
We stoked their anger and their angst, and we blamed it on Jewish people. We blamed it on people of color. We blamed it on gay people. We later got involved in the early stages of what today is known as Hammerskin Nation, and that's the largest organized white power skinhead group on the planet Earth. So nowadays, when violence is perpetrated by this group, I feel a great deal of responsibility. And speaking of which, Wade Michael Page, the man who murdered Pardeep's father and 5 other people, was a member of that group. I brought that up. Basically brought about an inner conversation where I'm saying, where do you get off thinking that you're going to go waltzing off into the sunset after all of the people you hurt, after all of the harm you've done? I left the movement in 1994. That's a pretty significant difference. On paper, we couldn't have been more different, but when we sat down and talked, we saw how much we had in common, and it hit us at that point, like, we need to work together. We got to do something together to basically get this message out to the world, and the more people we can help understand this, the better off we're all going to be.
Oh yeah, the murals. We had a group of people who like painted murals on the walls in our school, and they had like positive messages and like things to bring the community together. We've also been doing like what we like to work.
People of the high school age, you know, that they're the next generation. So it's important to me for them to have a good community for themselves, which will bring a better community for the younger generation and for generations to come.
If we're going to be the antidote for what's wrong with our society, we really got to focus on what's right. In my experience, what's right is the truth that human beings have more in common than different.
The more voids that a child has, the more vulnerabilities. So filling those voids with sort of wraparound programming, it takes a village to raise a child. And somehow, some way, we step back from that saying. But I think that saying is more true now than ever. It takes a village to really nurture a child.
To have amazing people in my life like Pardeep Kaleka, who have taught me so much and who love me and I love them. Pretty much every day I am literally in this state of joy and gratitude. That's what life's all about.
All right, Dr. Billups, Dr. Burke, I think we're getting pretty close to bringing them back.
Yes, I'm just sending a broadcast message to them.
Oh, okay. And those that are on live stream, thank you for watching, and definitely feel free to use for future programs and things like that. Welcome back, everyone.
And so everyone should be coming back in now. And Pardeep and Arno, I'll let you take it forward.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Billups. Yeah, welcome back, everyone. I hope that discussions went well. I just enjoyed a slice of pizza while you guys were all gone. So I thank you for that. Thank you for that little break. I think we got to build programming like that as we go forward. I loved it. So does anybody want to share or feel comfortable to share? And maybe without the descriptors of, of who said it, or let's just share how it felt to kind of listen to somebody share their feelings. So you can speak from your personal perspective rather than, saying so-and-so said this or so-and-so said that, but how it felt or how this program feels, or we'll just open it up. I think just raise your hand. I think that would be probably the best.
So Alexandria has raised her hand.
Okay, Alexandria, go ahead.
I would say one thing that has been, I guess, eye-opening for me through this program tonight is just noticing self-reflection. And it allowed me to take the time to self-reflect of something that has happened in my past, that where I've hurt someone intentionally or unintentionally, and just allowing to be a listener and deep listen to other stories has allowed me just to realize that everyone has hurt someone, and we just need to realize that we're not all perfect and that we all make mistakes. So it was really humbling for myself, and it made me really comfortable to share something that I've done in my past too.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alexandra. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And how, as far as like sometimes, Arno and I kind of talk about sometimes the world gets good at looking out of windows, but bad at looking in the mirror. And it's okay. We can do both at the same time, right? We can look at issues that we're facing in the world, but then we also need to look at and self-reflect. And self-reflection is not just, it's a gift to yourself too, because you can sit in the depth of that and to say, okay, how can I do better? How can I show up better? Not just for the world, but for yourself. Yeah. Tyler?
While I was listening to people in my group, I was thinking to myself of the question that I'm working in ministry this year, and our big theme is how is your soul? And thinking about that of like, what have I done to other people? How have I hurt other people intentionally or unintentionally? It brought me back to that mindset of like, how am I doing, or what am I doing to myself that is impacting someone else in a really bad way? And like you were saying, Pardeep, of like, we're so good at looking out of the window, but like at ourselves. And that was something that like I've been trying to work on, is looking at myself instead of comparing myself to other people. And that's something that sitting here so far already has really helped me understand, of like focusing on me more than other people in the world.
Yeah, no, thank you, Tyler. And I was thinking about that even as Arnold was talking about, talking about the first time that we met, and both of us were in a very vulnerable place. And this is two grown men who are sitting across from one another, from two different parts of the world, two different experiences, but similar tragedy and then I think there was a part of that voice with Arno, and he can talk about it, that there was this kind of like, you suck, and because of what you've done in the past, this person, and then what you haven't done. And so thinking about sometimes even like not going back deliberately to rectify the work or rectify some of that harm was kind of in his soul, right? You say, how is your soul? And one of the things that he said to me that I still remember as clear as day is that, he said, because he was getting hit up by all kinds of media, and he was doing the public speaking thing, and he was getting attention and notoriety for the life that he used to lead. And he felt guilty because of that notoriety. And he was like, if I could bring these, 7 people back, I would. And I wouldn't want the notoriety. I don't want this notoriety. I don't want this. And I remember just sitting across from him and saying, you can't bring these people back, but you can dishonor everything that they've lived for if we don't do what we need to do going forward. And that has been a constant check-in on your soul. How are you doing? How am I doing? How are we doing? How are all of that, right? And it's a struggle. And some days were bad, some days were good, and we still struggle with that even today. We had a discussion of a few hours ago, checking in on one another about some other stuff that we were dealing with. So constantly, that's a really wise question. How is your soul? Right? How's your soul? It's dope. I mean, only at Lewis University, when you ask something like, how is your soul? Right? Jacqueline and Arnold, please unmute. Jacqueline, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you both for being with us. I had typed in the chat to not interrupt, but I had said hearing others share about times they have caused pain to others, particularly those close to them, normalize that feeling of being the bad guy and eases the process of forgiving yourself for what you have done, regardless of whether the harmed comes to forgive you.
That's fantastic, and it's super important when talking about forgiveness to understand that whether you're forgiving yourself or you're forgiving someone who did something horrible to you, it's an internal process, and it's really up to you. Pardeep makes a great point every time we talk about forgiveness, is that it can't be prescribed. You can never say to someone who's suffering, like, well, you should forgive so-and-so. It's not how it works. It's tragically wrong. That's just not what forgiveness is about. But Pardeep and I are both part of a really amazing outfit called the Forgiveness Project. You can find out more about it at theforgivenessproject.com, I believe. If you just Google Forgiveness Project, you'll find it. But it's myself and Pardeep and like hundreds of other people from all over the world who have been on respective journeys of forgiveness. People who have survived rape, people who have survived kidnapping, people who have lost children to murder and to violent extremist attacks. And like when I was asked to be part of this, I'm like, I'm not worthy to be among these people, because it's very intimidating too. I can't imagine how I would feel if my father was killed because of the color of his skin or because of his background. And I haven't been through that. But I do know from just being Pardeep's friend and brother, like the effect that forgiveness has had on his life and what it's empowered him to do. And like I said, it helps me on my journey of self-forgiveness. So I'll talk about forgiveness all day long. I'll never tell anybody else that they need to do it. But my hope is that when I'm talking about forgiveness, when Pardeep's talking about forgiveness, when we're talking with each other about times we hurt people or when we've been hurt, is just that modeling can provide a light to lead someone to a better place. And that your thought in that regard is really powerful, I think.
Carolyn, is it Carolyn?
Yeah, hi. I sent something in the chat. I just thought, I don't know, I think this was a good exercise to really just put this into perspective. I think a lot of us don't like to think about ways that we've hurt people. We kind of try to shut it out or ignore it, but it's important to really reflect on it and how it changed you as a person. And not only will help you forgive maybe someone that you hurt, but help forgive yourself as well.
That brings to mind, I'm a Buddhist. That's like my spiritual jam. But in my experience, like all religions, you have prayers, you have mantras, you have things that you always go back to. If you're a Christian, there might be a psalm that really inspires you, and you keep digging that up when you need help. And for me, just the truth that all human beings share an equal capacity to harm or to heal. I feel like that is the secret sauce that we really all need to keep coming back to. And I learned this in all sorts of ways, but I'm reminded of one of our Forgiveness Project colleagues, a man named Tahir Malik, who is in Pakistan. And I think in 2006 or so, his wife went to the market to get groceries for dinner and was killed by a suicide bomber. And ever since, Tahir has started the Pakistan Survivors Network. It morphed into the Global Survivors Network, and it's people who have survived violent extremism and lost loved ones coming together to work for peace wherever they are. And Tahir said something that again, this is a very common spiritual theme. The indigenous peoples of America's kind of parable about having two wolves in your head. And who are you going to feed, the bad wolf or the good wolf? Well, the one you feed is the one who wins. And Tahir said it's puzzling to him to hear all these people debating about heaven and hell and searching for it, and like, this is heaven, that's hell. And when he said heaven and hell is within every one of us at any given moment. And so there's really no point in searching for it. We are it. And so when we are introspective, as you're talking about, that's when we're kind of exploring that theme. And when we can ground ourselves in that truth that we all have the capability for grace, and we all have the capability for horror, I think that's a real foundation for peace.
We are going to go into the second breakout. So Karen, we're going to save that question for when we come back from the second breakout around Arno's comment. But I just wanted to kind of mention while we're on the theme of forgiveness, and I think that oftentimes we talk about forgiveness and we've over the years have been fortunate to hear so many stories of parents who have lost, other people who have lost, and then people who have been abused, assaulted, and that's why we kind of say that we can't prescribe it, but we all act as guides. We all do, whether you want to be one or not, we all do. And we help people through their journey all of the time, with sometimes not even knowing it. Sometimes as you recognize somebody and you see them, sometimes when you hold a door, sometimes when whatever that is, we are all guides on this earthly plane, right? And when we think about forgiveness and we think about faith, oftentimes we think about faith in that same perspective of it's hard to prescribe it. But when my faith really became true to me was when I had to participate in it. So when somebody is prescribing it, they're telling you, they're saying to you, they can, but you have to live it. And no matter, like, nobody here would I want anything bad to happen, but some things are going to happen. There's going to be some struggles that you have in your life. And in those moments, participate in your own forgiveness journey and faith journey. And I'm reminded of, Jesus's last words as he's on the cross and he's being led to the cross, right? And somebody says to him as he's going up to the cross, well, if you're the Son of Man, then free yourself. And he kind of hears this, and he's on the cross, and what does he say? His last words were, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. As people are tearing up his clothes, as people are tearing up his garments. And I can't help but to think about life and existence and where we are right now, as we are so divided, as our country is. Seems like we are ripping each other's garments and asking, and that forgiveness, and oftentimes the embodiment of Christ and his lessons, we don't understand them from a personal perspective sometimes. But was he not talking about forgiveness as freedom? And as he told that person, watch me. And who was he speaking? And I have to ask, who was Christ speaking to? Yes, obviously he was speaking to God, but could he not have also been speaking to himself? Could he not have felt betrayed? Could he not have felt, right? If Christ was both God and man, could he not? And some of those things, when we think about forgiveness, do we think about freedom? And do we not? And do we think about vengeance? Or do we think about it in just the wrong way of saying forgiveness is just forgetting, which is an impossibility anyways? And that, I think, taking us into the next discussion. Dr. Billups.
Yes, thank you. So much food for thought and soul. In this second breakout session, we're going to return to small groups, And I'd ask you to consider the following question. What are you or we holding on to that keeps us from healing or becoming whole? And when we get toward the end, I'll try to do a better job of giving you a couple minute warning. I'd love it if you would collectively bring an additional question back to the main room with you, and we can continue to engage with Arno and Pardeep at that time. Again, what are you or we holding on to that keeps us from healing or becoming whole? And I invite you to join the groups again.
Sorry, it almost turned into a sermon.
Not at all. I don't know if you saw Claire Rothschild in the chat. She's our scripture scholar in our department. And so she was, I think, quite intrigued with your take on the Jesus story. So
if you go to Islam, right, and the Jesus story changes just a little bit, right?
Yeah, yeah.
According to Islam, he was saved, and not he wasn't. He didn't die. So I think that's a pretty significant change, but yeah, no, I think this is, I don't know, you have a question here. If you can see it in the chat. So maybe you can answer that question as they come back.
Regarding what practices?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Perfect. Okay.
And is one of you going to take Karen's question? Oh, that is, okay. That's the one you were referring to? Okay, great. And again, for our live streaming audience, thanks for your patience. We'll be regathering in just a few minutes.
Christy, I just want to say hi to Pardeep and Arno. I'm Dr. Freedy. I've been very quiet, but I also work with Christy, and I'm from Manhattan College, Lasallian College, and we co-sponsored this event. I'm really happy you're doing this. And I know that there are some of my students on here. So thank you for coming so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Freedy.
That means a lot. Appreciate it.
I'm liking the Lasallian universities.
Oh, good. Yes. Yes.
I did the undergrad over at Marquette, Jesuit, but
And Pardeep, I want to tell you that I'm Muslim and I head a Holocaust center at a Lasallian Catholic college. So
wow.
things are possible.
Wow.
Yeah. So I do a lot of work with, Jews, Christians, Muslims. We just finished a unit in my 110 class on Sikhism.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And so, yeah. And Christy heard them today, and so did James Burke.
No, I was really just you guys are amazing as far as just the interfaith just progressiveness that and you see it in different universities. I just think there's so much space and room to have these dialogues around faith. As we did a program recently of like shared figures between the Muslim and Christian faith. And talk a little bit about Hajar and Hagar and Abraham, Isa, Jesus.
That's wonderful.
Mary, Miriam, yep, and just talk about the language of dysphemisms and euphemisms and what can we do within ours to like appreciate and value these interfaith relationships.
Yeah, no, I really, really admire both of you, and I just want to say that in my own work on the Holocaust as a Muslim, my whole point is we have to acknowledge each other's suffering. And it's not equal, but it is suffering, whether it's under colonization for Muslims or whether it's the Holocaust, but it's different, right? I mean, there are different moments in time. But if we don't acknowledge each other's pain, we cannot have dialogue. It's not there, So I've had a lot of pushback, but also I've had a lot of very good supporters And it's been really important to do this kind of work, but I know it's very challenging. That's why I'm speaking to you, because my heart is with you. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much. And I can imagine some of the pushback is from your own community.
Mine and Jewish, both.
Wow.
Yeah, because, we have so much mistrust in our communities that when I got the position, people were like, oh, she's not going to do anything about the Holocaust, but things have really calmed down. I've been here for 10 years. And so I think you have to take the pushback and just set the example. I think that's what it's about. If you're strong enough to do that, I think that's the strength that it comes with.
Yeah, no, but Arno and I have never had any pushback from the internal community nor the out. I'm just kidding. We've had our internal battles.
I was gonna say what?
No, you're exactly right. You have to just be strong enough to take it and understand and really stand. Convictions can sometimes be unhealthy, but in this you need to stay strong to your convictions.
You do. You guys are marvelous. Thank you. Again, that's all I wanted to say. I'm going to click off now.
Oh, thank you. The there's a film that's going to be released. Arno and Patrice is releasing a Not in Our Town video of Tree of Life. It should be coming out in the next 2 or 3 months. And so think about Waking in Oak Creek and the same documentary crew, and they do a really good job of doing these films, right? Because they tell it from a this multi perspective of local law enforcement, the families to this. And so, it's just really great journalism. And they're doing one on Tree of Life. It's a little bit longer. I think the ours was 30 minutes, right, Arno?
Yes.
Waking. This one is 1 hour and 20 minutes. And they go into the depths of ideology too, which I think they didn't do as much in Waking, but around like anti-Semitism and the shooter's motivation and things like that. So in that respect, it's a little bit different, but it should be pretty good.
Does it have a name yet?
It is, let me see. I just got
I gave the small groups the 2-minute warning, FYI.
Okay. Right now it's just called Tree of Life. Right now it's just called
Good name.
Yeah. I think it'll have a different name. I just saw the rough cut. So once they release the full cut, I'm sure it'll have, maybe it'll be called Tree of Life.
I've closed the room, so everyone will be back within a minute. And if they don't come right back, we know that's a wonderful sign.
And Arno, you want to go right into the question over there, or just kind of reflect of?
Yeah, it's up to you guys. It would be great to give the participants an opportunity to share a little bit. I can go, right into the question in the chat.
And we've asked
I know we're running a little long already, so it's up to you guys.
No, we're close to on schedule, but I've asked the facilitators to put their group's questions into the chat so Jim's going to help look those over and maybe pose them, unless you two want to choose the questions yourself, but Jim can also help us to narrow it. But we'll start with Karen's if that's okay, but maybe see what the facilitators bring back.
Sure, that's fine.
And everybody's back now, so I'll leave it to you.
Yeah.
Hi, welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had a meaningful breakout, and really grateful that everyone's getting this chance to explore these themes with each other in small groups. I think that's really what drives them home in the most powerful way. We're going to begin a Q&A segment now, and I'm going to begin by answering a question that Karen asked in the chat. And the question is, regarding hatred being like an addiction, what practices keep you from relapsing into that mindset, especially with respect to self-hatred? And yeah, it's very, very much like addiction. As I mentioned, I'm an alcoholic. I drank profusely for 20 years. Also smoked cigarettes profusely. So I was straight up addicted to alcohol and tobacco. And I've quit both of those. And there's a lot of interesting parallels. I think it was easier to quit hate as far as like actively perpetrating it. But the aftermath of it, of the hate group days was much harder to deal with than the aftermath of tobacco, certainly. And as far as alcohol is concerned, it was very much interwoven throughout that time. Regarding practices, though, I began a meditation practice in 2009. And it's interesting because when I talked about the suicidal depression I went through, that was pretty much the entire year of 2007. And it was my daughter who snapped me out of that. She was about 14, and she literally grabbed me by the collar and was like, "Dad, I need a dad. Like, get over this." And understanding how much she needed me at my best that I could be was a big factor in like snapping out of this hole I was in. But I was still struggling with like how I'm going to deal with my past and the harm that I had done. And in 2009, I had reached a point where I was in a much better place, but I was kind of fooling myself. I was just like, well, all right, this is what's up. Okay, I'm never going to forgive myself, and I'm just going to try to find peace with that. And lo and behold, that's not a viable way to move forward. To just, I held this grudge against myself because I felt like it honored the people that I had harmed. Like I'm just going to redirect all this hate that went outward, and I'm going to direct it inward and somehow carry that with me everywhere I go, as if this little coal of hatred I'm carrying is doing something good for the people that I've hurt. When I first sat down to meditate in the Shambhala Buddhist tradition, very simple meditation called Shine, or peaceful abiding, and you basically just sit and you focus on your breath. And as I'm sitting and focusing on my breath, there's all kinds of thoughts intruding. It's the nature of meditation. It's the nature of prayer also. And these thoughts range from like, oh, that jerk who cut me off on the way here, or I'm really hungry, I want a double cheeseburger with the works from Cops, best burgers on earth here in Milwaukee. Either way, that you want to just kind of dismiss these thoughts and return your focus to your breath. So you're not judging the thoughts, you're not like dwelling with them, you're just kind of letting them go and returning focus to your breath. And for a split second, your focus is on your breath, and you're doing what your intention is, and that's to be present. Your mind's not worrying about the future or regretting the past. And of course, the second you are focused on your breath and feeling it go in your nostrils, another thought comes and intrudes. And that's meditation. That's really all it is. It's just working through that process and doing it on a daily basis, and really committing to the discipline of it. And after I got done with that first 10-minute meditation session, it dawned on me that if I can work with the thoughts of the guy who cut me off and the double cheeseburger at the works, I can work with my grudge against myself, because they're literally made of the same raw material, my mind and the workings of how's your soul, my soul. Of course, the grudge is way more difficult to deal with. It's this gigantic mountain of suffering that I've endured and created and put out into the world. It's got a bit more weight than that double cheeseburger with the works, as weighty as that is. But it was a proof of concept. So it's like, if I can work with it here, I can work with it there. And so since then, I've had a regular meditation practice, and it's really empowered everything that I've done. And it's very practical also. There are times when I was doing interventions with people in active hate groups, and rather than physically harm them as the old Arno would have done when he was presented with something distasteful, I just would take a breath, and I feel my breath going in through my nostrils. And in that split second, I'm releasing myself from the hostility that this person I'm facing is radiating at me. And I'm disconnecting from that hostility and aggression, and I'm reconnecting to them with compassion and with empathy, and reminding myself, like, dude, that's where you were 20, 30 years ago. And let's do everything we need to do to guide this person to a better place. So the meditation is incredibly powerful. It's incredibly transformative. And it's also secular. I'm a Buddhist. I've taken a refuge vow. But you don't have to be a Buddhist to meditate. You can do it from any faith background. Shambhala is a great place to learn. There's Shambhala centers everywhere, and they have free meditation classes at every Shambhala center all around the world. But you can really learn all sorts of valuable meditation techniques from all different places. So I think anyone who hasn't dipped their toes in meditation, I highly, highly recommend it.
Okay, and thank you so much, Arno. And I think I see two hands up. Alex, your hand was up first, or was it Chris?
It was Alex, and then Cassandra, actually.
Perfect. And we're gonna make these replies a little bit shorter so we can try to get to everyone's questions. Go ahead.
Can you all hear me? Perfect. For Arno and Pardeep, when you look at the state of our country and of our society and all of the division, and granted, a lot of the division has always been there, but when you look over the last few years, including the last 18 to 19 months, how do you wrap your heads, if you can, how do you wrap your heads around the actions of white supremacists, and what goes through your head when you see people in power, especially politicians, who embrace and try to really enact that white supremacist ideology in everything that they do, especially, Arno, for you, given your past, what is it like to see it on the other side?
For me, but the first thing is and this isn't a popular opinion, but it's not that I don't take sides. I'm very mindful about cause and effect and interdependence. And I first of all, I'm mindful not to like cast myself as the good guy. And because all of this, everything that you mentioned is all us versus them, good guy, bad guy thinking. I'm a huge fan of George Orwell, and George Orwell wrote an essay on nationalism that I highly suggest everyone read. If you just Google George Orwell nationalism, you'll find this essay. And he talks about how nationalism isn't necessarily restricted to geographic borders. There could be nationalism around an idea. You can be nationalist about a religion. You could be nationalist about an ethnicity, about the color of your skin. So to me, I see nationalism feeds nationalism. Right feeds left. I don't think that all the problems that we're facing are all just like strictly because of the right side of the political spectrum. There's a far right, and then there's a far left, and they are symbiotic. When you really just objectively look at them, they think and act in the exact same nationalist way. And even though they claim to oppose each other, they actually live for each other. And that there's politicians on the left who say, I'm anti-Trump, I'm the anti-Trump. Okay, well, you're a reflection of him. Maybe not in the particulars of your us versus them narrative, but in just having an us versus them narrative. So I think what's really important is to understand, again, like we talked about earlier, we all got heaven and hell inside of us. We all have that capacity to harm or to heal. And coming from that place, I think there's certainly hope to address this divide in our country. And I also try to be present and really keep my perspective with my face-to-face interactions with people instead of social media echo chambers, which are a huge issue in the divides that we're talking about.
Yeah, Alex, I think, and I think that some of the questions that I was reading really go into this of this country. We do have to understand and we have to acknowledge that there is blood. And this blood isn't, I mean, it's deep in the foundation of this country. And this division has been here for the time that I mean, for 500 years now. And we have looked at people in this country with less value and less worth. And there's been systems and policies and all of these things to help reinforce where we are in 2021. And I think that we need a spiritual sort of revolution where the spiritual revolution is going to call for, and it's going to have to include forgiveness. As much as people may not want to hear that, it's going to have to include forgiveness. It just cannot be this vengeful, let's go forward and let's be against this, and then that's going to be make it right. But we do also have to understand that this is very much inside all of the institutions that we exist in. You know, as much as we love Lewis University, it's at Lewis University. As much as we love, you know, this or that, it's everywhere, and we have to do the work. And it takes all of us to do the work. It's not just your professors. It's not just the students or the faculty or the student body. It has to be community led, and we have a promise to fulfill. And these promises and these peacekeepers have come to us before, you know, and said, "Hey, listen, I may not make it there. I've seen the mountaintop, and I may not make it there with you, but we believe you can make it there. So take this inspiration, be forgiving, and understand that forgiveness is again, it's not about forgiveness, but it's about being vengeful to all that blood in the soil of this country." And Chris?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and interrupt. I'm so sorry. People are, I hope you saw my chat. We're going to bring an official end to the evening, but people who can stay on, Pardeep and Arno have offered to remain to entertain a few more questions if people are able, but we are closing in on 8:30. And so I want to respect that people have set aside an hour and a half for this and bring this to a more official close, and then we'll continue as anyone is able. So I'm going to ask Pardeep to just offer a brief reflection to close our time together, and then I have a few quick comments, and then we'll stop recording and continue our conversation with those who remain.
All right. I just want to thank you all. I want to thank you, Dr. Billups. Thank you, Lewis University, everyone that was able to attend tonight. And if you can, I just humbly ask us to bow our heads and close our eyes as we close off tonight, and just as we pray together. Dear God, Spirit and source of all, you are the source, and we offer this prayer. In your grace, there are so many joys, for we cannot fathom your limits. We ask to please bless us with your kindness and protect all those who are gathered and not gathered here tonight. Today, we specifically come together as multiple faiths, races, and cultures to honor you and your spirit of working towards an end to earthly poverty, to earthly suffering. We ask for large-scale systemic change and spiritual growth, because building a just society is to build a truly inclusive world where all God's children are to be loved and nourished. Please give us the courage to face the current challenges. We know that there are many blessings in the suffering. Please give us the ability to grow our sacred consciousness and unlearn separation. We long to be one with our interconnected spirit. We pray for those in the world who have lost lives and livelihoods due to COVID-19. We know that this is taking a physical, mental, and spiritual toll on us all. We pray that everyone can meet the challenges to create a society where your love is the foundation. May we see one another with the eyes of reverence, eyes of respect, and eyes of worth. We thank you for putting each and every one of us in the position to support one another. We ask you to bless Lewis University. We humbly accept your spiritual guidance, even though sometimes it can feel spiritually heavy. But because we have one another, we will support one another in any way that we can. And we will all carry this heaviness as a collective as we march forward. We are grateful for every second, minute, and hour that you gift us. We are thankful for the justice work that is being done by all the students and leaders gathered here tonight. We are also grateful for the youth and all the leadership and ability and their imagination for a new dawn. Please bless them with the wisdom to take on the numerous challenges that exist in our very divided times. Lord, I ask you to soften the hearts of those who yet don't understand what the spiritual undertaking is about. I ask us to simply not be inspired, but be committed. Let us carry this message to our respective tribes and communities and help those who may not yet understand. Finally, let us do this with sincerity of spirit, compassion, love, and your grace. Amen. Amin. Salam. Shalom. Vaheguru. And Ashe. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, both of you, Pardeep and Arno. On behalf of Dr. Jim Burke and myself, thank you, Dr. Livingston, Ms. Kaur, and again, Pardeep and Arno, to our facilitators and all participants who joined us this evening for your contributions to a wonderful evening of story, insight, and encounter. The time went so quickly. We're very grateful for your phenomenal gifts, which are helping to heal some of humanity's many wounds and contributing to greater justice and understanding in our shared world. We hope you will join us again next year on Thursday, October 20th, 2022, for our 5th annual Grow Memorial event. We're working on a very special guest, and we can't wait to share that with you. But we'll send out that save the date information in the coming months. To all of you who attended this Grow Memorial event from near and far, thank you so very much for joining us. Live faith, hope, and love in our hearts forever.